taking the time to join us today. I'd like to begin by acknowledging that we here at the University are meeting on the lands of the Awabakal people, and we welcome their elders, both past, present and emerging, to these proceedings today. And I also want to acknowledge other Indigenous and Aboriginal people that are joining us today, as well as paying my respects to the traditional custodians of the lands that you're all zooming in to us from today, from across the region and beyond. I'd also like to welcome State Member from Wallsend, Sonia Hornery, who's joined us as well. So thank you very much, Sonia, for making time. Anne, do we have any apologies for today?
Yes, we've got apologies from Marie Gleeson, Glenn Dorman, Ian Farnsworth, Marilla North and Brian Roach.
Okay, thank you. Does anyone have any other apologies that they'd wish to convey?
I take Shane Blatchford's position today. My name's Tony McCrell. They can call me Mckean.
Mckean, okay. Good on you. What's your first name, sorry?
Tony.
Tony, okay. Thanks, Tony. Just like to introduce our new intern in Special Collections, Freda Mcgrady. Freda, are you there?
Johnny, I don't think Freda's joined us yet.
Oh, okay. All right. Well, if she does, just we'll break out and we'll welcome her in. So, Anne, do you want to do some housekeeping, Zoom etiquette, housekeeping?
Yeah, look, I thought at the beginning of each meeting, we might just remind people. I'll just share my screen quickly. Can you see just the...
It's backwards.
Oh, is it? Oh, gosh, yeah. Ignore that.
Okay.
It's just an example so that people that might be not familiar with Zoom or don't use it too often, on my computer anyhow, it's on a desktop. It's got these features down the bottom for our presenters, how to share a screen. And I'm always happy to help have a practice run or have people send me a presentation and I can share it on their behalf just to make it easier. And also to remind people to put any questions in the chat or any comments. So yeah, that chat function is really handy. You can send it to the whole group or you can send it to individuals. And to also remind people to put themselves on mute if they're not speaking. Sometimes during the presentation, even if there's the slightest bit of background noise, often it just diverts and sends the camera straight to the person making the noise. So yeah, just that bit of a reminder. And we also record the meetings. If at any time someone doesn't want to be recorded or if you want a section edited out, please let me know and we can edit anything out that we don't want to make anything public that people are uncomfortable with. So just to remind everyone of that as well.
And did you want to show the reaction button where people can put their hand up as well?
Yes, yep. Sorry about that. So the reaction button is just down the icon just towards the right of your screen. So with the reaction, I can't actually press this because it's a screenshot, but if you click the reaction button, you can applause if it's after a presentation. If you have a question that you want to ask, you can put your hand up. So if you don't want to sort of just write in the chat, if you have a question, just pop your hand up and we can go straight to you to ask a question.
Okay. Thank you, Anne. So, yes, wonderful. Okay, so we're always trying to make this a better experience for everyone, and we're experimenting with a new format today where we'll have a couple of guest presenters, but we'll break them up. So we'll have a guest presenter now, then we'll have some latest news and events with some shorter sort of presentations, and then another guest presenter before we then have a hot topics discussion, and then hopefully we'll all be done by 2:30. Okay, so Our first guest is Evan Mchugh, who has recently been responsible for publishing Reshaping the Hunter, which is a new work or update of an older work that came out many years ago. I'm sure we'll be enlightened, but this was basically, if anyone's seen the harbour of Newcastle, it's really been sculpted by engineers. And I know that the earliest incarnation of this book basically documented the work that engineers had in reshaping the port. So over to you, Evan. You might be on mute.
There you go. I'm one of these not very familiar with Zoom people.
That's okay. That's okay.
I was just saying good afternoon and thank you very much for having me. So the book Reshaping the Hunter, the intention with it was Engineers Australia back in 1983 had published a book called Shaping the Hunter, which essentially was a history of as many aspects of engineering in the Hunter region as they could cover in the space available in the book. It was quite comprehensive. It wasn't the most exciting read you'll ever go through, but it was it really did encapsulate a lot of the history of engineering, not just in the Hunter but throughout the Hunter region. Particularly things like development of the port, shipbuilding, coal mining industry, civil, structural, a range of other aspects of engineering. And obviously, the things that have happened since 1983 through to the present day have been incredibly transformative, not just in the region, but really globally. But there have been some specific events in the Newcastle Hunter region history which have really changed the nature of engineering and also the nature of the city. So what I looked at, and we came to the title Reshaping the Hunter because it became very clear very quickly that these significant events that had impacted engineering, the response of engineering to that then had a significant impact on the prosperity of the region and the success, because really we're an industrial based area, and the ability to respond to significant change really determines whether or not you become part of the Rust Belt or whether you continue to grow and prosper. So some of those significant events in particular was the closure of the BHP Steelworks. And what was really interesting was that the number of people who were engineers who saw that coming, but also recognised that the region, the closure of the BHP Steelworks was only one of a number of things that were involved in sort of the globalisation of the world and of industry, and that if you could not compete globally, you could not compete full stop, and you were in trouble. The days of protectionism effectively ended in the 80s, and businesses have had to adapt throughout that. So a lot of the engineers that were working at BHP went out and set up their own companies or joined companies that were struggling with the impacts of globalization, and then moved into new industries or adapted the way they were doing business and finding these little niches that they could exploit as being sort of smaller, more nimble, more agile organizations. And so that's sort of where we came to the title Reshaping the Hunter, because these people's ability to adapt and change as in the face of a changing world has really made a huge difference. And if you actually look at the cover of Reshaping the Hunter, and I'll just hold it up, I'm not sure if you'll be able to see it very well, but that cover is really emblematic of what we're talking about, because the building is the Honeysuckle Railway Workshops, and it is now a museum. It has been reshaped and reimagined as a new. It's the same building, but it's been completely repurposed. The hooks that are on display out the front of the museum from the basic oxygen steelmaking furnace at BHP, repurposed as street art. and then you see the buildings in the background in what was the industrial railway area of the city. It's now all apartments, and you can see there on one image, you can see 3 examples of how engineering, but also the region has adapted and changed, and it really spoke to what we were talking about in terms of what we were doing. One of the other things that was particularly significant was the impact of the earthquake on the city. Strangely, and this is one of these themes that came through a lot, was it was a disaster, and yet it was an incredible opportunity for engineering, because the amount of work that came out of particularly for structural engineers, but for a number of branches of engineering in repairing infrastructure, checking that buildings and dams and railways and so on were all intact, was a significant amount of work for them. And they actually, instead of going backwards, they went forward, and they were instrumental in keeping the city prosperous by keeping the lights on or getting the lights back on. I think in one instance they had Tomago up and running about 2 hours after the earthquake, and hospitals coming back online and all of the essential services. Despite the fact that they had fires and broken equipment right across the electricity grid, they were incredibly capable and agile in responding to that crisis. One of the things that I'm indebted to Hunter Living Histories is for things like the earthquake chapter. I tapped into a lot of the oral history recordings that are on the Hunter Living Histories website. That was actually put that on the engineering side, they came from Judy Lindsay in particular, and others who've been going and grabbing prominent engineers and getting their stories. And from those, for example, I was able to lace together a narrative of what actually happened from an engineering perspective, being sewer lines and water lines being broken underground, the electrical system going down, having to check whether people were racing off to make sure that the dams weren't about to collapse, and all those sorts of things. And it actually makes an incredibly compelling narrative. And it's one of those things where you might see all of the materials that you're gathering and storing away. But when someone like I come along looking to tell a good story, and I've got all of these fantastic resources, that certainly made a big difference for me to actually get the voices of the people who were there on the day. And you could still get that sense of the urgency and the sort of it was not so much panic as the moment of sort of thinking, geez, we could die in this building, and then recovering and saying, okay, what's going on? Rod Caldwell, for example, was working for the Electricity Commission. He was driving home from work, and he immediately turned around once the earthquake was over and went back, because he knew he was going to be needed, and coordinated the emergency response. So those sorts of stories that have been preserved by Hunter Living Histories and have made available to the public are incredibly valuable for people like me. There was also the photographs that are on the website as well, were tapped into heavily, and it's great when you actually find a really good resource that's not quite a one-stop shop, but it gets you a very long way down the track to getting all of the historic images that you're after. And of course, in that context, talking to Murray Mckean, who is a photographer working with BHP Steel. He was involved in archiving and preserving a lot of the material, but when the BHP Steelworks closed, he regretfully informed me that a lot of the material basically just got binned. And that was, is a tremendous loss to the city and to the city's heritage. That as the BHP became a bigger and bigger company, and aspects of its history that it was once very proud and keen on preserving, if it wasn't worth, if they couldn't make money with it, then they weren't as interested as they have been in the past. So the materials that are available are made increasingly valuable because of the fact that there's been so much that's been lost. And we could, of course, talk about buildings that have been lost during the earthquake, but I think that's more than I've got time for. The other thing that I covered as well, one of the things with globalization was, having sort of looked at all of the change and the pressures that the city was on, I also focused on a number of the companies that have really thrived and prospered. And some examples of those are Orica, whose technology centre out at Curry it's the World Technology Centre for Orica, and is one of the most advanced blasting technology organisations in the world. It's a world-leading organisation. AMP Control, I think you all know, is in the mining and electrical engineering field, is providing extraordinary technology and partnering with all sorts of extraordinary organisations in creating the future, which I think is absolutely fascinating. And then you have companies like Safe Earth, which they do earthing engineering, and as a non-engineer, it really is one of those what's that? I don't even know what it is subjects, but they're the leaders in making sure that when you've got an electrical substation or any high voltage electricity near people, that you actually make it safe. And it does involve a lot of where they've developed world-leading equipment. They said there is a lot of tiptoeing that goes on when you're testing the equipment, because if it's not working properly, you can be exposed to some fairly scary things. And hair raising is the least of your problems in those circumstances. So those are some of the sort of companies that really have responded and given us the sort of the theme that wraps the whole story up, which is that where some people have seen disaster in events that have occurred in the Hunter's history, others see opportunity. And the interesting thing, I think, is that we're about to go through, we're going through disruption with coal, but we're also going through very significant disruption with energy. And it was great to see there are new companies emerging now that are world leading in actually developing technologies that are going to deal with the issue of disruption in the energy sector. And they're not seeing disaster; they're seeing opportunity. And leading the world in some of the solutions to the problems, not only that we're going to have, but also the rest of the world. And they're exporting and getting recognised around the world for those abilities. And an example of that is Switched In, which basically takes all of the rooftop solar that's individual products and combines them and creates essentially a virtual power station, which to the grid looks like a power station, but it's actually maybe 1,000 homes and people's air conditioners, and it actually puts intelligence into a whole lot of small pieces to make it actually work like a coherent whole. And that sort of stuff is, it's really a testament to the abilities of the engineers of the Hunter region. And so it was a great opportunity for me where I did some of the historical stuff and got the foundations of the book from there, but also put in my little contribution of telling the story of what's going on now and what the future is looking like. And I take an optimistic view of history, and I take an optimistic view of the future. And it was a great opportunity. I really, really enjoyed getting to talk to some of these people who are at the forefront of the world and what we're doing, and putting it in a format which is hopefully accessible to engineers, but also to a general readership. And my colleagues who are online, it would be very remiss of me. One thing I've got to do is actually plug where you can get the book from. So I'll just finish up by saying that if you're interested in getting a copy, it's available from the EA office, the Engineers Australia office in Bull Street, from the Newcastle Museum, and also from Harry Hartog's bookshop. Does anyone have any questions?
Well, I just want to thank you for giving us some good news, because it's been pretty bleak out there. And I just wanted to say, are we going to make it? As a human species, you give me hope that we've got people on the case working it out. So that's good.
Yeah, well, the inspiring thing with these engineers is, and I love Merv Lindsay had this line. He said that the electricity is an engineering problem that politicians are trying to solve, and
yeah,
and there's an element of that. But the thing is, that the chapter on electricity was an extremely difficult chapter, and I got some incredible help from some very senior engineers who gave me a great deal of their time, and then a great deal of criticism that was constructive, which caused me to rewrite the chapter twice. Yeah. And the third time was where I actually had enough confidence in what I was writing and the amount of knowledge that I'd gathered to actually call what I think the future is going to look like. And it turns out, and the statement to say it's an engineering problem that politicians are trying to solve, it's actually now both an engineering and a political problem. But it's also a situation where, you see bumper stickers that say, I have solar panels and I vote. That everybody is now a power generator, and but making that power generation coherent and effective, you need engineers, but you also need a policy framework within which people can develop technologies and roll them out. And so that's, in fact, it's where we've all got a part to play. And yes, I mean, there are all sorts of challenges that we face, and engineering can't solve all of them, but it is contributed massively to the quality, particularly in the Hunter region, the quality of life of every single one of us. And you can see, even as coal mining is being threatened by policy changes around power generation, you can also see that engineers are looking for opportunities to repurpose power stations, to turn great big holes into the ground into energy generation. What is it? Pumped hydro.
That's been the struggle all the time. I mean, from the historical point of view, putting these things up online, it's wonderful. I'm so glad that they were useful to you in your work, because I mean, it's one thing enjoying the nostalgia of what we've achieved. It's another thing to sort of look at history from the point of view of, look, there were challenges back then that were met. We've got new challenges now. We know that we can deal with them, because we've dealt with the old ones. But it's like at the moment we're freeze frozen into this 19th century world that we've worked well in. And the scientists are telling us we've got to change, but I'm not seeing too much, activity at the station, more so than just bickering over anyone that tries to suggest something different gets thrown back into the cave. Go back into the cave. I'm saying, no, I don't want to go back into the cave. I want us to think our way into something better. And it's the same thing when we first rediscovered the convict coal mines in Newcastle. Peering into those holes, it gave me a really good understanding that this world that gave us this prosperity also enslaved the world that we were in. And I think the call now is for a new form of power, and that's what you've been articulating. I'm just so happy that you were able to frame the reshaping of the Hunter, because I always thought to myself, looking at the history, that Newcastle came up with the solutions on this side of the world in the 19th century. They tried coal mining everywhere else, but we seem to get it done here, and we've always been that place that's found the solutions. If we can't do it, no one can, I mean, that's the sort of spirit that we try to put into the people through the history. So I haven't seen too many hands up for questions, but does anyone have a question or a comment? I just want to thank you, Ewan. Thank you very much. Joan?
No.
No? Mckean, did you want to say something?
Evan, fantastic work. I'm going to go out and buy the book because I'm in it on everything. I started at Bayswater. I worked at BHP, One Steel, Tube Makers, you name it. I've drawn everything in the town. But Mr. De Gravio, there is something that you might not have heard of, AM fungi. It is the answer. It can sequester carbon 10,000 times greater than any plant or tree, and it's in a symbiotic relationship. And at the Hunter Community Park in Broadmeadow in the future,
Is this what Bob Catter was talking about the other night on Q&A?
We will be growing it in vast quantities.
Okay.
It is a solution. Anyone can do it. I'm actually in my little lab here at home. I've got quite a lot of stuff, and I'm building a bullet that you just press into the ground and infect the ground with it.
Okay.
There's going to be a range of people doing soil power, earth batteries. I built one the other day for the science. We have a science quest challenge at August with HISH, which is the Hunter Innovation Science Hub. I don't know whether you know Tim Roberts.
Yes.
Tim and I'm one of his devotees. And so I'm building the challenge for the kids, for the 50 schools of the Hunter, to build an earth battery and get the highest voltage in 10 minutes out of a coffee cup, a nail, and a bit of old coat hanger.
Fabulous. Well, I'm getting more and more optimistic as the meeting proceeds.
Good.
Now, Evan, Judy Lindsay says you're far too modest to say what an exceptional readable book you have produced. It is really a compelling read. And Joe May says, fascinating work. Thank you, especially for the optimistic understanding of disaster as gateway to opportunity and the role of engineers in the transformation of our environment. So there you go. Thank you very much. Any other last comments or questions for Evan? Okay.
Comment. Just a comment to Evan. Thanks for sharing how you've used the oral histories, because I think sometimes they're a resource available and we try to promote to our students and researchers, but yeah, the way that you've used it, and if it saved you a lot of time as well, you know, not having to sort of go in and talk to people. So yeah, thanks for mentioning that, because yeah, I think we
did you see
forget.
the MBN material on the earthquake as well? It was digitized.
Yes, yeah. I was grabbing things from everywhere. I kind of squirrel quite a lot with my research, and get taken down avenues far too far, and I'm going, you know, this is not going to get into the book or whatever, but I just keep following it because it's interesting, and the footage and the stories that come from that are you know, they're just extraordinary.
Oh, well, look, thank you very much, and congratulations on this book, and thank you very much.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Okay. Wonderful. All right. Now with latest news and events, we've got Amanda Hines from the Hunter Regional Committee of the National Trust to talk about the Wickham School of Arts, which
Yes.
I believe, according to Ross, you were given a tour through. Is that correct?
Yes, thanks, Johnny. Yes, a couple of us from the National Trust Hunter branch went, I think, the start of April for a look through. HCCDC, the Hunter Development Corp, is obviously in charge, and they've been doing a lot of shoring up works and securing the building, and they believed it was at a point where it was safe enough for us to get in because the hazardous materials had predominantly been removed, asbestos, etc. So we went in, and they've been dealing with a lot of termite damage, is what they kept talking about, and damp issues, which is to be expected of a building of that age and that location. But they have cleared out a lot of the additional walls and partitions, etc., that have gone in over the years, so that what is left is just two big ground floor, first floor open spaces that are wonderful, and it's really quite exciting to see. So the idea is to get the building to a state that it's going to market. The expressions of interest have opened for the building to developers. They did do a taster, or a testing, I should say, a little while ago with developers, and they got over 100 responses. So they've now opened it out wider, and that's going to be open for about 10 weeks or so to see who, for them to put their concepts, ideas forward. I did view last week the design guidelines that have been put together by the government architects. There's a bundle that goes out with the expressions of interest, with public art strategies, and there was also the conservation management plans, etc. So I viewed those last week, and from a heritage perspective, heritage is in there. but it's obviously taking a big picture view. But we have had, the National Trust did have input into those design guidelines, and a little bit of it has been carried through. But yeah, what can I say? It's exciting to see something being done with the building, because it has been sitting dormant for so long, and if it had remained that way, it would have been probably a very sad state. But at least at the moment, it's right to sit there for probably another 12 months, I believe, until the whole process of going to the developers, and then they'll shortlist that to 3 developers, and there'll be some design competitions within those last 3 for certain key stages in that last part of the Honeysuckle HQ. Yeah, it's about mid next year. It'll all be firmed up. Hopefully we finally get a solution for that area in the Wickham School of Arts, which has been a very long journey.
Yes, because up until a few years ago, we thought it was just going to be knocked over. So
yeah.
it was,
yeah.
I just want to thank a few people, because Ross, I think, came to us many years ago and actually found the tangible connection between Henry Lawson and the School of Arts in Henry Lawson's writing. So that became a post. We had the ADFAS people who started that wonderful campaign doing the histories of the School of Arts with Leslie Gent and Jude Conway. And just little by little, I mean, I'm sure that when people do a search on these buildings, they do a Google search to see what is important about these things. It's always helpful when there's something there that people can get a bit of a grasp about why this place shouldn't be knocked over as opposed to why it should. So I just find it a really, you know, a miracle actually that
yes,
it's gotten this far.
It is. It's a fascinating building, as we know, steeped in history. And I agree. The more you do the research, there's so many layers to this building. It was a little sad to see the 2 side buildings go, but that was the compromise that had to happen, unfortunately. But it is looking good, the building, and yeah, it'll be open for adaptive reuse. A community accessible building, I believe, is what they're earmarking it for. Great. So we shall see what goes in there.
Wonderful. Thank you very much, Amanda. Does anyone have any quick questions or comments? Just while we're on the topic of Wickham, another aspect of Wickham that's been causing me to think lately after speaking to Ross is the Wickham storage shed. The number of collections and personal archives and artwork collections that have gone with that building are just phenomenal. I mean, I just feel that there should be some kind of inventory, because it's almost like the Crystal Palace fire for our own local area. So many amazing collections were housed in that storage. So it's been a bit of a disaster we're still finding out about. So anyway, that's another Wickham related possible area that we need to have some kind of brief inventory in to see what we've lost.
Johnny?
Yeah, Ross.
If I can just make a comment. Yes, it is good that the Wickham School of Arts has been saved. And the Newcastle Herald and the Newcastle City Council don't always play a good role. For example, with the old store building, there was very little objection raised to the demolition of, even if the facade had been kept, it would have been good, but nothing's been kept. However, in this particular case, both the Herald and the council also, and our local member of Parliament, Mr. Crackenthorpe, supported us. So I also think that the fact that most people have actually heard of Henry Lawson, the fact that he did spend some time there when he was about 16 years of age, was another factor in helping to save the building. They are going to keep a line of sight from the building to the harbour, which is the good news. It's still a bit of a worry that you could end up with a 16-storey tower block or even a 6-storey tower block right next door. But if that happens, well, it's just too bad. At least the building is there.
Well, that's good. It's nice to have some older buildings in the landscape as well as the newer ones. So thank you very much. Look, I've got a bit of room for any updates from the Hunter regional groups, if there are any. Otherwise, Anne, you've got quite a long list of news.
Do you want me to go now?
if you like, unless
Yeah.
someone's got a burning update, but there's always time at the end.
Yeah, look, I guess during the month I always get quite a few emails where people wanting to sort of share, just people happy for me to share things at the meeting. So Ros Kerr, she has done an oral history, an interview with the Lighthouse Arts, and it's a really interesting video on geology that relates to the Deep Time Project and some of those artefacts. So I thought I'll share my screen quickly, but I've just uploaded and just added it to, there's already an existing post that really relates to geology. So I've just added it to the end of that. We've had a number of visitors over the last couple of months, and you know, people are often really interested in geology. So I thought I'd just point that out, and people can sort of watch it in their own time. So I'll pop that in the chat as well. And also from Dr. Brian Walsh, he's got a new book that's come out called Before and After 1822, Aboriginal and European people of the Patterson Valley. So again, I'll share in a moment just a PDF that's got some more information about that, but it was to recognise and to reflect on the 200 years since the large-scale dispossession of Aboriginal people from the land around the Patterson area. So I'll share that. It's available up at McDonald's bookstore in Maitland and at Patterson Courthouse and Museum, and also online if anyone's interested. This month, theme for the Fringe History, like we do a call out for blog posts, relates to medical histories. So this is one that I know Jude Conway's interested in, and just thought I'd sort of promote it to this group who, if you know, people have got like specific interest in that area of medical histories of the region. So yeah, that's the theme for May. The Fortress Newcastle exhibition was launched a week ago, the Friday night, and was a good turnout. There was Marla, myself, Coral from the library, and Sharon Claydon, Peter Hobens, and different members of the Industrial Heritage Group and small museums. So that was a really successful night. And just talking to Ron Barber today, they've had quite a good turnout of people visiting the exhibition, particularly over Easter. He said there was a lot of people from Sydney and from other places outside of Newcastle. So yeah, the turnout's been great, and it's on until May for anyone who wants, the 8th of May, Mother's Day, I think. So it finishes then. And just the other news is that the Stories of Our Town have been shortlisted for a National Trust Heritage Award. So that was announced a week ago, and I think they hear about it a week Friday, whether they're successful or not. But they were nominated in the educational section for the work that they've done in promoting public history across different age groups. And the other thing they'll share in the chat as well is last week the library had a webinar on cultural heritage in a technological age, 3D scanning of the Warramai fishing tree. So Nicole Chaffee, I think Nicole was she was going to try to join us today, but if not, she's happy for me to share that video where she describes the 3D scanning of the tree that's currently, it's located in the Newcastle Museum, but that's quite a big project. So I'll share that as well. And that's it.
Thank you, Anne. Yep.
Sorry, Cheryl-Anne here. Can I just add to the Fortress Newcastle update?
Yeah.
I've been the last 2 Sundays, and yes, the turnout's been absolutely fantastic, and very exciting that we had a descendant come in of the gentleman that's seated on the gun at Fort Wallace, which is one of the main poster images advertising the exhibition.
Mm.
And so she's come in with the original photo and said, this is my dad. And then only yesterday we had another gentleman come in, and his father is also in the photo on the opposite side to this lady that's identified her father as being in it. So we're putting the two people together in the hope that they can swap images, and any images that they obviously are happy to share, we're going to add to the Stockton Historical Society's collection. So that was pretty exciting. And we also have had several people come in with their war medals and their badges, really on the start of their journey of trying to identify where their ancestors served in what campaign, and giving them direction where to go to try and discover for themselves that information. So it's been really exciting. And yeah, I'm tickled pink with the turnout.
That's great. Thank you. Yeah, you should have another one. Another fella found his father in one of the photographs, and so I forwarded it to the Newcastle Industrial Heritage people. So you're going to have a few more people coming out of the woodwork as they.
I truly hope it's a catalyst by which people dust off the records, and
that film especially has reached areas outside the history crowd. So it's really in the community. So it's fantastic, and it's wonderful that it all came to be. You know, it was just so fragile in those early stages. But you know, Peter Hovens was so dressed beautifully for the occasion. I couldn't be there because COVID knocked me for 6. But so who was speaking?
Johnny, Ron Barber.
How you going?
Adding to that, one of my museum crew went in to have a look at it last Tuesday when it was allegedly closed, but and he said, "Can I take a photo?" And I said, "Yes, of course you can." And he said, I said, "Is there any particular reason?" He said, "Yes, that's my wife's father." And he said, "I've never seen a photo of it."
Wow.
And she hadn't ever seen it either.
Oh, that's amazing.
In one of the industry photos.
Yeah.
And one of the things that's come up, there was some family came in on Wednesday, and they were talking to Stephen Ford, and they told him that they were related to the Indian Army officer who was on loan to the Australian Army, who was in charge of the ammunition store at the proving range at Fern Bay. And they actually lived on the site, and these people knew the kids and so on. They'd gone to school with the kids of that family. So it's just amazing, and it's been a constant stream as far as we've been concerned, and the fort's just been so happy to have it run there. It's been terrific.
It's been such a great project because it's really joined the dots with how this whole, and it's put Fort Scratchley now in a context of fortress installations all over the region, and largely a story that no one knew about. You know, so it's been a big shock to everyone. So there's got to be a lot more coming out of this, and hopefully it will build into something touristic in nature, which is what we're going to need, I guess, in the next few years. Any questions or?
No, can I add one other thing?
Yeah, sure.
Further to your comment, Ron, I had a gentleman come in yesterday whose father, Ferdinand Zoppo, is his 3 times great grandfather, and he was seeking information on the gunpowder explosion, and he really didn't know where to go to commence his search. So I've suggested Trove, etc. And I actually took a bit of time this morning to formulate an email with lots of clippings, because it was very well reported, not just in Newcastle but further afield. This was an explosion that happened in June 1908. So yeah, people coming out of the woodworks, and the assistance you're able to extend to them to be able to further their knowledge of their family history, it's wonderful. And I truly think that the exhibition is going to be a catalyst by which many people get to know more about their history, and Newcastle's better advertised on the national stage. So very
well,
proud.
congratulations to all you wonderful community people, Bob Cook and all the industrial heritage guys and all the community groups that were involved, and David Dial and the rest, and Ron at the fort. I think it's been a real proud moment. So good, great work.
Yeah.
Great work. Look, I can fill in on the early part of May with some of our blog updates before I went into hiatus. I'm just going to share my screen now quickly. So this is the Newcastle in 1889, the original colour lithograph, which you might have read about in the paper, and this was what I scanned just before we went on leave, thinking we'd get to some of the other things, but we were just so chuffed. Paige Wright, our librarian colleague, found an original of this colour lithograph. The best we had to go off before this was a really awful black and white microfilm that was shot sometime in the 1970s. And so it was just wonderful to be able to get our hands on a complete and beautiful copy, which is very rare to find for this sort of thing. Usually you find tears and cracks and missing bits in this kind of paper stock, but this was just fantastic, and really gives you the ability to really zoom in on the landscape of Newcastle from 1889. And I've recommended that people go and go into the digital library in the city of Newcastle and just type that address into the address bar there and have a look at it on a gigantic big screen there if you want to see it in detail. I've scanned it at a number of resolutions, the largest being, I think, 45 meg, which will break your computers, but, you know, it's worth it. Download it if you have to, and then have a look. I mean, this one's giving me trouble, but we'll see how we go. Oh, yes. Now let me see what happens when I really click on it. Give it a time to work. Give it time to work. Doesn't want to work. Oh, it doesn't want to give me the big one. Come on, you can do it. You can do it. Oh, well, it's giving me something. Oh, might. Let's see. There it is. I get very excited by these sorts of things because the detail on these things were just amazing. So anyway, enjoy that when you can. You can also see all the transcribed words that went with it on our previous post from 2017. This was the best microfilm copy that we could find, and this was what we spent our time doing back in 2017, is just scanning as high a res from the microfilm as we could, which is great, but it's not in colour. So if you can locate these things, it's always wonderful. In November of 2021, there was a free living digital heritage conference online, which was one of the greatest conferences I think I've ever been a part of, for three-dimensional heritage, virtual heritage. All the papers that have been able to be made public are up there now, mostly from day one. It ran for 3 days and it was just exhilarating. So if you want to have a look at the possibilities of what can be done with 3D technology and historical materials, then check that site out. It's we might try and get one of the guys from Macquarie Uni to address us on it. And this was another one on coal loading in Newcastle, dovetailing in with Ewan's talk on Reshaping the Hunter. This is basically a presentation that the late Russell Rigby gave on the engineering that basically was in place for the coal mining industry in the harbour. So it was almost precision of a clockwork mechanism to get coal in and out of this harbour. And again, a real amazing presentation that made the port come alive, and the engineering works that underlined it. And another little fascination that on Captain Cook, we found in one of the books the excerpts from his journals, really concentrating on Captain Cook's sighting of Nobby's, what we think might be the Sugarloaf Mountain, and Port Stephens. So everything that we've been able to track down, including a rough version of one of his charts, which actually did have Nobby's on it. So it wasn't the one that was in the finished printing, but at least he drew that little dot of Nobby's. And thank you to Mark Matrikis that helped provide details from the logs. They're not easy to navigate on the sites, but we extracted all the material that was in our neck of the woods, just to help put a bit more flesh to the bone around this. But you do find that he uses Aboriginal words. So someone had been feeding him the Aboriginal names for these places. So it's there's more work that needs to be done in that area. Okay, so they're the updates. And also that we've covered that one, haven't we, Anne von Bertok, from the last meeting?
Yes, we have, yes.
Okay, anything that's happened in the last 3 weeks on special collections, please help me if there's something new that's gone up. But that's us. All right.
Johnny, I might just take this opportunity to introduce our new intern, Freda Mcgrady.
Perfect.
Freda, if you want to give everyone a wave and say hi. Freda will be with us in Special Collections for the next few months, working on our Decolonising Collections exhibition, which is part of the larger Decolonising Collections work that we've been doing here in Special Collections. So that will be our next exhibition, following on from the Fraternal Societies exhibition that we'll be launching in July. So we'll keep you posted on the details of that one, and you'll get to see some of Freda's wonderful work.
And I also noticed, Marla, that some of the Copley slides had gone up.
Just a sneak peek, Gianni, for
Okay.
May Day. So Emily, our Vera Deacon intern, who's here with us today as well. Emily is currently sorting and rehousing those slides that were donated to us by Janet Copley's niece, Sandra. And so the next part of that project will be scanning all of the Copley slides relating to the Newcastle region and their union work as well. So there'll be some gems in there, no doubt.
All right. Thank you very much, Marla. Thank you. All right. Now to our next guest presenter, Dr. Ken Thornton. Ken will be speaking to us on the following topic. By 2050, there will be no coal-fired power stations in the Hunter Valley. What should historians be doing now? Over to you, Ken.
Thank you very much. It's interesting that I follow on from Evan's presentation. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Yep, we can hear you.
Good. I've read some of Evan's Reshaping the Hunter, and I can certainly recommend the chapter on reshaping power. Evan notes in the subtitle to this chapter that the Hunter is a region where change is almost the only constant in the energy sector, and I certainly agree. It's been changing for a long time as new power stations replace old ones. Oh, I've got to share my screen. Good point. There we go. Sorry about that. That's better. So that's right. So as I said, Evan has let me into this title. So in the last, in the 1990s, there were 7 large power stations in New South Wales, coal-fired power stations. Now there are 5, and 4 of those are in the Hunter. Now, having said that, it may surprise you that of March this year, there were over 3 million power stations in Australia. And have a guess where most of those were? you've probably got one of them on your roof. So it's not surprising that traditional generators are being priced out of the market by renewables. The first Liddell unit came out of service for the last time on the 1st of April this year. The other 3 are scheduled to close this time next year. In Liddell's case, environmental issues also played a part in AGL's decision. Now, profitability and environmental concerns will probably see Bayswater close in the early to mid 2030s. I'm not sure when Vales Point will close, but before Liddell's first unit closed last month, 11 Hunter Valley power stations had closed over the last 70 years. For example, the power station at the bottom of Tyrrell Street in Newcastle closed in the 1950s, and Zara Street power station, where the Foreshore Park is now, closed in 1975. Profitability will probably see a Raring close in or from 2025, but rest assured there will be no coal-fired power stations in the Hunter Valley by 2050. So what, some people might say. Some will rejoice that this will be so. Greenhouse gases and global warming as terms that I hear you shouting at your computer. Some will bemoan the loss of jobs. Now, I spent 35 years in power stations, and I feel sorry for those people that are going to lose their jobs through no fault of their own. Some people will consider the impact on local communities, and others more competent than I will write about the strategic machinations of large blocks of coal-fired electricity being removed from the electricity grid. Others will write about the political lead up to these closures and then the political ramifications for their future. Now, important as each of these is, we as historians need to consider other aspects of what is happening. In 10, 15, 20 years, researchers will be looking for details of what these large industrial monsters did, why they did it, and how they did it. They want to know what they looked like from the outside, and they want to know what they looked like from the inside. They'll want to know what it was like to work in one of these industrial giants, and they'll want to know what they sounded like. And they'll want to know what the gender mix of the workforce was. They'll want to know, well, they'll want to know everything. They'll want to know what people like these are doing. And all these people have an association with power stations in the Hunter Valley. And unless we document that connection now, who will know in 20 years' time? Start with Zara Street in the early 50s. What are these guys doing? Which one's the tradesman? Which one's the supervisor? And which one's the tradesman's assistant? You go across to Liddell 1970. What are they doing? What's on fire? Is it a serious plant incident or something else? And the one bottom right, that's Liddell 1973. What are Norm and Peter in the foreground doing? What are they looking at? And what is Keith in the background looking at? And Araring 1983. What is Neville Wran looking so smug about? Now, power stations are amongst the largest and most recognisable complexes built in the Hunter Valley during the 20th century. As I said before, there's been at least 15 of them, and 4 of them are still operating.
We're going to show you descriptions now of some of those 7 on each pass. You have to tell us which state we're talking about, please. So there'll be a little description. There'll also be the capital of that state. So which US states are these, Barbara? Let's reveal our first board of states.
I don't know where that's coming from. No, it's gone. As I said, there have been 15 of them at least, and 4 of them are still operating. All have had a profound impact on the landscape, both visually, environmentally, and also culturally, and some more so than others. The electricity they generated had a transformational effect on the local and state economies as well as on society. The stations impacted the lives of many millions of people over those years, and more directly, they affected the lives of many thousands of people employed in them. As newer stations reach an unrivaled scale and level of technical sophistication by the mid to late 1970s, older, smaller, inefficient ones became obsolete. But our demand for electricity saw larger, more efficient, and even more sophisticated ones built. Now, by the 3rd decade of the 21st century, that is now, even these have started to succumb to cleaner, cost-effective, renewable forms of energy production. Now, as each station has closed or ceased production, it was generally demolished in part or whole. A few have been repurposed. Stations such as Balmain and Bunurong and Pyrmont in Sydney, Zara Street in Newcastle's East End, and Munmora on the Central Coast just do not exist anymore. And all that remains of Wangi out on the lake is a vandalised building shell. It and White Bay and Ultimo in Sydney and Mullumbimby Hydro Station in northern New South Wales and Carrington's hydraulic engine house are the only power stations with state heritage listings. Now, when government-owned power stations were closed, documents relating to their history and operation were usually retained by state records out at Penrith. But with current stations being privately owned, there is no requirement for this to happen. Therefore, any source material is unlikely to be preserved in archives. Now, for future generations to better understand how this critical industry served the people of New South Wales, there is also a need to document its history, but also document the current electricity generation processes. And I think it's really important that we document the present. It's important as it is to cherish what happened in the past. Sometimes we overlook the importance of what's happening today. This is especially true in times of emails, Facebook and Twitter and Zoom and Instagram and Messenger. We take the present for granted. And let's face it, in most circumstances, we as historians would have had a much easier job if the people we are researching had spent more time documenting what they were doing and what they were thinking. Charlestown's Mark Fetcher has done a sterling job in writing about the technical evolution of New South Wales coal-fired power stations. That book, the top book, came out in 2018. Now, I've written on the history of the industry in New South Wales in the 20th century, as well as technical and social histories of Munmora, Liddell, and about to embark on Eraring. But we need to know more about specific sites before they close and disappear. We need to know about their infrastructure, their plant and equipment, their production processes, the environmental policies they had in place and the environmental regulations they had to work to, their organisational structures, where in the hierarchy were people. and also the memories and experiences of the people that worked in these places. Now, it's also probably a good idea that we think about preserving things like employee records, although there may well be privacy issues there. The production records, financial records, probably commercial in confidence, but worry about that when we get there. Again, what was it like to work in these places, and what was safety like? We have to think about building architecture and the design of offices and control rooms and workshops. And trade unions, are they as active now as they were in the 1970s? Now, every power station that I ever worked in had a sports and social club. So it means we have to think about what employees did on the social side outside of work. And we have to think about the gender mix in the workplace, and also clothing. Now, I don't know whether you can see the guy in the bottom photograph. He's a guy called Dave Hollis. You can see he's wearing a yellow hard hat, brown trousers, and a fawn shirt. Well, they don't wear those things these days. You've got to wear high-vis work gear. And I can remember way back in the 1970s when I started, you had to wear white overalls. To get this exercise underway, a newly formed project team has started to look at what has happened in power stations, why it happened, and importantly, how it happened. Now, at this stage, the team is a former chair of Engineering Heritage Australia and myself. We've had preliminary conversations with Engineer Australia's Engineering Heritage Group here in Newcastle, Heritage New South Wales, the Powerhouse Museum, and two large energy companies, AGL and Origin. In addition to a history of each power station, including the social aspects and oral histories, we want to outline a history of electricity production in New South Wales from the advent of the first public power station in Tamworth in the 1880s to the era of privatisation of the present day. Now, like all research, we're going to have to begin the process of finding those archives and previous research that still exists. We know, for example, that State Records has a lot of material on the former government-owned power stations. They also have Pacific Power's photographic collection, huge collection, 180,000 images. Still got to go and have a look at State Library, and obviously we've got to look at local history libraries like the one in Layman Street in Newcastle. And Johnny tells me that he's got in special collections 5,000 construction plans for Wangi Power Station. We know that there is at least one international organisation that has an interest in the conservation of industrial heritage. I suppose some funding would come in handy, so that means we've got to find sponsors or apply for grants. And I suppose there are professional and community organisations around that might be interested in this project. And I suppose it's also a good idea to determine those local communities which most identify with their power station. So I keep asking myself, have we bitten off more than we can chew? Who knows? But only time will tell. But I think it might be a bit of fun to find out how we go. Thank you very much. Questions if you have them.
Thanks, Ken. I guess whether these archives survive is a difficult question, especially when there's no law that protects them.
That's true.
Like you have state archives, but it doesn't mean that they're not protected. I mean, I was thinking while you were talking there to the Elmer archive, the electric light manufacturers. They were a private company, but their Records came to us. They were a very diverse company, mixed male and female employee mix. We got personal records, I think, among that lot. But it depends on the people working there. I mean, you noticed the name of someone in that photograph. That's a pretty special thing to know the name of someone in a photograph, because a lot of the time, if it ends up in an archive, chances are the archive won't know who the name of that person is.
Yeah.
That's why it's really important to get material out into the public as soon as you can, so that people with that memory of how these things work can actually explain. I mean, this is what happened a few years ago when we were digitising the Australian Rail Historical Collection. Australian, is it ARHS? Whatever that stands for. My COVID brain's not working. But railway history, and those images landed on Flickr, and the people that actually worked with that rail stock and knew the difference between those engines were able to share that knowledge of how it actually worked. So I think that's what you're after in a similar way, but it's still a world that's there. But as we're transitioning to something new, it's important to flag as because yes, it will be something that will be in the past, and we won't know what any of these things mean.
My concern is that we don't want to turn into another state records, because we can't do that, and state records won't take the stuff.
Yeah, well, there are limits to what people can take. Everyone's under space
of course
issues at the moment, and with the Wangi material, I mean, there was 11,000 plans there, not just of Wangi Power Station, but also of the mining plans. There's stuff out in the region which a huge amount of material, but you know, how much, where is it? For a start, how are you going to look after it? I mean, luckily for us, we cleaned out the rule of thumb in an archive is the minute you clean a space, an archive fills it. And we spent weeks just cleaning out this area of the library, which was like the junkyard. And then I get this phone call from Lake Macquarie saying, we've got all these plans that are in the baby health centre at Morisset. They're all of Wangi Power Station. And luckily for us, they were state archives. So we got some funding to buy some plan cabinets, and then we got some more funding to employ people to actually list them.
Fair enough. Yeah.
But there's still a huge number of plans that are being used by our professors in architecture. Michael Chapman, that's very interested in that form of architecture. And recently, we've had a number of developers come through looking very interestingly at those plans. So I don't know, it might not remain a shell for much longer. That's all I can say.
Good point. Yeah, good point.
So you never know as these buildings get repurposed, because they're pretty massive sort of structures.
This is true.
Ken, I have something for you. I drew Bayswater, and I still have in my old box. I've got the top. I kept the transfer house on the top. I did some of the other bits and pieces, columns and other bits and pieces. But we did it at St Leonard's for the New South Wales Energy Commission for a drafting house called Commercial Design. They were a bunch of cowboys, and I loved working for them. There was about 30 of us in a room, and the commission used to walk in on a Monday and go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and count heads on how many people were working on the board, and then write in the book. And then they'd come on Friday and count the heads, and that's how they got their costings done for drafting costs.
Goodness me.
Crazy world, mate. So I've got that. I've also got Red Bank Power Station. I did the precipitators on the side of that. So
okay,
got all those drawings, and I've got those on CAD, I think, because the first one obviously was old scratchy with a pen, but but I made a mistake. I drew the extensions to the architects faculty at the University of Newcastle. It's a couple of red boxes and a flying red wing. And it was designed by a notorious architect. And of course, he forgot that mosquitoes like to come in. So opening the walls was a bit of a heat safe problem. And when it was all done and finished and time went by and I was having a big cleanup of my drawings, I decided to return those as a contribution to the university, of which they gratefully accepted. Later on, years went by, and as a scanner, I've got quite a few scanning machines, I decided I'd go out for a test and I'd scan the boxes, and then I would put the drawings into the CAD, and then I would try to see if I could match the two together as a challenge to myself. So I went back out to the university to get the copies made. I was going to copy them at my own expense. Lost, gone. They don't have them anymore. So that effort of doing that, from taking from my safe little drawing filing cabinet and giving it to someone who actually was the owner, was a mistake. I shouldn't have done.
Mckean, who did you give them to?
Went into the main person at the university at the time who was, I can't give you his exact name. It was just, I just turned up.
Was it a faculty? It was where faculty of architecture?
Faculty of architecture, yeah.
Okay.
I still want them. You know, the Blacks, the builder, they went bankrupt, and so I got paid for the job. I don't know whether they ever got this job. Actually broke them for some reason. It was a hard job, for a different job for everybody. You know, like I don't know whether you've been at and walked around the red boxes, but there's a unique building. It's all abnormal. Everything about the shape, the size. Charles Rzewski was the engineer. I don't know whether you remember Charles.
No.
He was quite a prominent engineer in Newcastle, and Charles changed things on me at the very last minute. He had a sort of small epiphany and woke up on a Sunday morning and decided to increase the size of the columns because he felt they were going to fly or bend over with a heavy wind, because there'd just been a new schedule issued for wind loading. Because the flying wing is actually just sticks up on 2 or 3 columns.
If you got any detail, like if you got detailed descriptions of them, they might have ended up downstairs with us. I don't know.
Or with IFS, Johnny.
Or IFS. So you never know where they've gone. I mean, generally, I think the architects used to like keeping a resource library for themselves. So it might have been, you know.
It's about 35, 40 drawings in a roll about that big. Yeah. It's got TM illustrations because that's what I was trading as at the time.
TLM.
No, TM, Tony McCrell illustrations.
Okay. Tony McCrell.
And that's it. And they were just on film. They'd be on clear film.
Yeah.
And I would have stuck on my label. I've actually got those old labels kicking around. I saw them the other day. They're just a stick-on label. But I can pick the exact year and everything else from my resume but I still want to do it. It's a challenge. Like if you know anything about it,
send us an email and we'll send a note through to our faculty librarian who's who can have a look for us as well in the
I think I can
faculty
tell
of the building.
Sort of what,
because it might be just sitting somewhere and no one's, they've just forgotten where it is.
Yeah.
But
okay, well, that's it. So,
all right, well, thank you very much.
I've got half a dozen other things. There's a turbine casing for one of the power stations. I did an energy efficiency upgrade to that. And also, here's a good one. Once upon a time, there was a leak in the turbine casings at most Alstom power stations. And the leak is a naughty gas called hydrogen, and they use that to cool the turbines, the generator part of it. So if you know anything about the Hindenburg, playing with hydrogen can be quite a mistake when mixed with oxygen. So someone came to an engineering company called Wilson Oliver and asked them if they would cut half a dozen new O-rings in situ on the end of the turbine case, which, if anyone knows about the challenge of cutting an O-ring just on a Coca-Cola can size, 65 millimeters, it's quite an effort. 3 meters was an even bigger effort. So I designed and built that machine for Wilson and Oliver, and it went into service, and they machined the first one casing up there at the valley on one of the turbines. The machine cost 45 grand to build. And then the service was provided by the engineering company. And then Alstom said, it went really well. How much do you want for the machine? And he said, oh, well, we've done a couple of services and we paid 45 grand, so give us 45 grand. And then they did, and then they boxed it up, and then it went round the world. And every turbine case that they owned around the world and every turbine generating facility had O-rings cut in the end of it and on the inside of it, just so that they didn't go bang.
There you go.
I did that. Got the drawings for that.
Fantastic. Well, there you go, Ken.
I got a whole stack of things. Calais B power station, lots of stuff around the port. I did the zinc and lead concentrate loader. I got all those drawings.
There you go. Well, Ken will be happy to work through every single one of them, won't you, Ken?
Oh, absolutely. Got nothing else to do.
Ken, I'll send you my resume. Mark the ones you're interested in, and I'll dig them out for you.
Now,
Okay,
Nerida Lithgow through the chat suggests, Ken, could you pitch for an engineering heritage archive museum to be developed at Muswellbrook Power Station? Could be a timely proposal for the current owner to gift to state, etc. Plus tourism draw card for Muswellbrook community as it transitions.
Goodness.
Always optimistic, of course, in these sorts of things. But I did actually work at TAFE many years ago and did a bit of work with the council and the university and industry up there. You know, some of them are surprisingly philanthropic in how they think about things, and they understand I mean, as you know, like the industry and its cultural power. So, you know, the actual physical presence of the museums, of the power station on the way into and way out of Muswellbrook would be an interesting opportunity, you know, museum this way type thing. They might actually be interested in some sort of positive gift at this particular time, and to sort of get thinking about the value of the things that you've just outlined. Ken, it was fascinating. Thanks. Anyway, just a random thought bubble from me.
Yep.
And thank you, Ken. Unless there are any other questions or observations.
No.
Thank you, Ken. All right. Well, if anyone has a hot topic or something they wish to raise, an update, now's the time to do it. We've got 8 minutes before we come to an end. Yes,
Ron Barber again.
Yep.
On Saturday at the Fort Scratchley, as well as the Fortress Newcastle thing continuing, there's to be something of the order of 20 plus vintage Rolls Royces. Now, I'm not sure of the time. When I get that, I'll send it on through to Anne or something so it can go out there, that are going to be on the parade ground, and apparently the group that are bringing them are actually paying for a gun firing at that stage as well. So,
you have a lot of fun out there, don't you?
Yeah, we certainly do.
Rolls Royces.
Yep.
Yep. Cheryl?
Hi, I just wanted to provide an update that Stockton Historical Centre had a pop-up display last Saturday for the 100th anniversary of the unveiling of the Soldiers Memorial in Stockton. Same day, I believe, as the Dudley anniversary of the 100th anniversary. So yeah, it was very well received, and we got a couple of comments, are you going to do it again? So we'll talk as a committee, but probably around Remembrance Day. So yeah.
Wonderful, thank you. Yes, Judy.
Yeah, it's me actually, Merv.
Merv.
On the 24th of June, which is a long way off, there'll be another meeting between now and then, I guess. 25th, sorry, 25th. There's an engineering heritage walk through the streets of Newcastle. It'll be promoted through the museum and Engineers Australia. We've done about 4 of these, and they're always well attended and quite enjoyable.
Okay, so book now?
No, book in about, it'll be, the promotion will start in, I think, 2 weeks, 2 to 3 weeks.
2 weeks, all right. Great, we'll keep an eye out for that.
I'll mention it again at the next meeting.
Yes, do so. Any other updates? Well, look, I tell you, we're going to finish on time. Isn't that wonderful? What a great success. Anyway, I just want to thank everyone for making the time to join us this afternoon, and we'll see you next month. I haven't forgotten you, Dennis. Thank you very much for sending through your comments on the Maitland plan. I'm just going through my backlog of stuff. So anyone that sorry, narrator, did you want to say something? No? Okay. Anyway, we'll catch up with whatever we're supposed to be doing over the next few days, and keep you posted. But anyway, thank you very much. Stay safe, healthy until we see you again next month. And thank you very much.